So if this is Dune Prophecy, where's April, May and August Prophecy? Greetings, you absolute peasants. 'Tis I, Lord Karazaki Shishimi Nagiri Edamame Billingshurst the 17th. And I'm disease-free now, you know. And today I'm taking a look at Dune. Dune Prophecy, that is. And only the first half of it at that. Why the first half? Well, as my dear papa told me, if it's worth doing something, only do half of it and then pay someone else to finish off the job. Oh, actually it's because the first 3 episodes are all that are currently released to my mansion for my perusal. Ever since I first saw the weird and at times quite unsettling David Lynch's 1984 Dune, I grew a love for the esoteric, enigmatic and deadly universe of Frank Herbert. Lynch's movie, as unique as it is balmy, takes a fair crack at Herbert's masterpiece, but admittedly oversteps somewhat. Dune is a particularly hard universe to pin down. Perhaps this is what maintains its appeal for me and for others. His film features performances from Jean-Luc Picard, Dean Stockwell, Max von Sydow, whatever this thing is.
Not until you tell them both who I really am.
Sting of all people. And set Kyle MacLachlan up as a movie star, clocking in at a bloated, and yet also paradoxically compact, considering all it's covered, 2 hours 17 minutes. 1984's Dune made a frankly bizarre decision to needlessly overcomplicate an already complex story, with whole side plots about a sound weapon, or weirding modules as they are known, and the machinations of the Space Guild navigators. The weirding modules aren't even canon, they made them up for the film, and this was already a story so Mandelbrot-like that when it was first released in movie theatres, they handed out cheat sheets with glossaries on them. This was not even the first try at conquering the Dune universe, with 2 attempts having a stab at it in the 70s, both failing. The first was helmed by Alejandro Jodorowsky. It never reached production, in no small part because the film was being turned into a 14-hour-long epic. How the hell was that going to work? But before the project collapsed, Jodorowsky had convinced Salvador Dali to play the part of the Emperor. Dali wanted to be the highest paid actor in history, and signed a contract to receive an awe-staggering $100,000 an hour. And this was in the 1970s, don't forget. Jodorowsky then cut and reworked Dali's scenes so that his entire part could be filmed within 60 minutes. The rest of the Emperor's monologue was set to be spoken by a robotic lookalike.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger! No, Will Robinson!
Dali eventually went along with this switcheroo on the proviso the robot lookalike be given to his museum, and that his throne in the film be made of a toilet, intersected by 2 dolphins. Of course, why wouldn't it be? And I don't know about you, but just from this alone, I feel we as a species have missed out. The second attempt at Dune in the 70s amazingly involved Ridley Scott, and, fresh from designing Jodorowsky's sets, H.R. Giger. You know, also of Alien fame. It too, though, went belly up. How the hell did we not get either of these 2 films? Anyhow, let's fast forward 50 years to the present day. Denis Villeneuve gives us Dune Part 1 and Part 2. A third instalment is also on the way. This time they've been thinking outside the name convention box and going with Dune Messiah. Crazy. Villeneuve's Dunes are more closely aligned with the Frank Herbert novel than Lynch's, and nimbly melds the inner darknesses of the universe with beautiful cinematics of sweeping deserts, barren palaces, and gladiatorial combat. Oh, as ever, there's a little bit of diversity, inclusion, and equality thrown in, or die, with some race and gender swaps going on. It was released in 2021 after all, but Villeneuve handled this minefield with aplomb and relinquishes only the bare minimum of what he had to do, setting both the race and gender swap on one character, Lyot Keynes.
Nice.
Now, I hate to bring this up again, but we do need to have to go into this D.I.E stuff a little bit more. Apart from being the process through which managers can separate actual working employees from the pronoun people, the process of D.I.E, or hiring people because of their gender, or skin colour, or some other physical asset, instead of a person's actual abilities, or, you know, talent, has the effect of lowering the bar to the lowest possible denominator. Besides which, this stuff is just tiresome, and the people who peddle it an entire magnitude greater of tiresomeness. And so watching Hollywood and much of Western culture implode because of this twat foolery, all goodwill towards this kind of thing has gone from me now. And so, when Hollywood comes a-calling, presenting a show about a group of women controlling men, I am suspicious. Deeply suspicious. This is what D.I.E does. It has the opposite effect of what its supposed peddlers are pushing for, making you think far more critically of any female or ethnic-led projects than you would do. And please let me be clear, I love women. Some of my favourite films have women in them. In some of them they even get to keep their clothes on. The rules are Demi Moore, I suppose. Anywho, alarm bells were already going off in my mind when settling down to watch this. But I think Prophecy managed to stay away from the worst of D.I.E typecasting. So far, at least. Oh, certainly it brushes right up against some girl bossery now and then, but it steps back down again. I don't yet feel it's too egregious. The more serious infraction comes on two separate occasions when it hurtles breakneck into the power of many. But it just manages to veer away at the last moment and save itself. And us. So, where were we? Ah, yes. So on the back of the successes of Villeneuve's duology, soon-to-be trilogy, we come to Dune Prophecy. An ambitious 6-part series, Prophecy is set just over 10,000 years before the films of Denis Villeneuve, which, as a prequel goes, is quite an ambitious time gap. That's like doing a prequel to Star Trek and setting it in the Stone Age.
Damn it, Jim, what the hell's the matter with you?
The show is focused on the Bene Gesserit, a sisterhood of witch-like sorceress advisors. Think maesters in Game of Thrones, but them being women, loosely magical, and all deliberately positioned in the houses of the universe to serve one single greater agenda instead. The show starts off with a short coda about the Butlerian Jihad. I once had a butler jihad when I found a bone in my salmon, but that's a different matter. In Dune, the Butlerian Jihad is the classic sci-fi trope of man versus thinking machine. Nothing wrong with that. I have noted, though, that this scene has come under a fair bit of criticism, but personally, this shot really doesn't bother me. The armour of the humans is true to the world building, and to my eyes, the machines look designed well enough to separate themselves from the mechanics of other sci-fi dystopias. Except Mass Effect. They do look a little bit like Reapers from Mass Effect. It's my understanding that in the canon of Dune, the Butlerian Jihad is really about humans moving away from artificial intelligence. It's more of a philosophical evolution, but for the purposes of filmmaking, I suppose they wanted a visual representation of this. The scene is right at the start of the show and only lasts about 15 seconds, so it's probably best not to get hung up over it either way. Oh, and the humans win, by the way. Humans win, and thinking machines are outlawed. We then jump forward a century or so to the third generation of sisters of the Bene Gesserit, Ciao Bella. Headed by a Reverend Mother Superior, this all-female cult attempts to sway the minds of the men in power. They stand at the side of the Emperor, who in turn is fighting his own political battles to keep in check the great houses of Dune and stop any usurpation. They stand at the side of Duke Richesse, leader of House Richesse. But make no mistake, this is no Paul or Leto Atreides. Duke Richesse is conniving, hot-headed and avaricious. The show is clearly setting the stage for a score of political machinations. The sisters of the Bene Gesserit, neck-deep in Machiavellian scheming. One of the problems this poses is that, unlike, say, Game of Thrones, which is a world resplendent in greater and lesser houses, each with its own members, agendas and modus operandi, in Dune Prophecy, the factions of any significant note are only the Bene Gesserit, the Emperor, and, so far at least, House Richesse. I may be a little bit harsh on this point, for if more factions and more characters were introduced too quickly, the understanding of what is going on might quickly diminish. A case in point is that even by the end of episode 2, I was still confused as to who was who within the lesser members of the Bene Gesserit, not least because I typically wear veils masking their faces and several of the women look similar anyhow. I certainly didn't know any of their names. So, perhaps fewer people is a wise trade-off, but nevertheless the political landscape certainly seems a little Spartan to me. Something that did strike me was that, when compared to the Dune we know, not much has changed in 10,000 years. The houses are the same name, same home world. The fashion and technology are about equivalent. You could have told me that this was set 1 year before the films, and save for a switch of characters I would have believed it. Now I can't be completely certain, but I would suspect all of this is accurate to canon, and so I can't be too critical. But it does seem amazing that a house can continuously rule its respective planets amongst such political upheavals for 10,000 years. There may actually be good reason for this, what with the distances and isolation of space, the stagnation of technological advancements due to the recently ended machine wars, but if this is so, such reasons have not yet been implied. Oh fine, it's not quite true that nothing has changed. The Harkonnens, who in this era are very much a minor house, still hold their hair and at least some melanin in their bodies, and hail from Lankivale instead of Gady Prime, but you get my point. Money has clearly been spent on Dune Prophecy. The costumes and set pieces look good, CGI seems to hold up without closer inspection, and the whole piece maintains a similar feel to the Dune universe of which it is expanding. Mark Strong as Emperor Javico Corino is as reliably good as ever.
I really wasn't expecting this.
And Emily Watson, a veteran name for British audiences, knows how to master an austere and understated character. Ragnar Lothbrok too makes an appearance and knows how to be typically unsettling, though he does tend to mumble through some of his lines, but I really shouldn't be the one to complain about that. The weakest link is probably found in the young version of Valia Harkonnen. Jessica Barden, who is older than I realised when I looked her up, sincerely hams up the role during the first episode. Her character is the focus during the initial segments, but once the story gets going, at least she's not in it for too long. By the time she returns in episode 3, her acting seems to have settled down a little, thank goodness. Little Lord Foreheadsalot is mildly annoying, but that's okay. And Chris Mason is perfectly adequate as the palatial swordmaster, but on a personal note his Scouse accent rung through me and made me bristle. Now if you don't know what a Scouse accent is, think of someone coming from somewhere in your country which has the most untrustworthy, most unreliable reputation. This is worse. This is where the Beatles come from. As regards scripting, there are actually some quite good lines at times, especially in the second episode, almost bordering upon Shakespearean. Ragnar Lothbrok's Iago pairing off to Mark Strong's Othello. Later on there's a somewhat twisted take on Romeo and Juliet, but who cares about those two overrated love duds? One of the larger problems the show suffers from is that its pacing is on the slower side, a particular problem in today's climate of TikTokery insta-booking. The first episode in particular drags. Always start of your best day. It tries to make up with it by 2 particularly unpleasant assassinations towards its end, but I suspect by the time they happen the damage has already been done. It is better to start slow and end fast than the other way round, I suppose, so perhaps Prophecy will rectify this, but we'll have to wait and see. Episode 2 spices things up with a lengthy sex scene, plenty of boobage all around, and fond we are of all of that. Why didn't they lead with this? And I cannot lie, watching the Bene Gesserit attend council with the Great Lords and hand signal to one another in their secret language, coordinating to control the direction of the meeting, is quite good fun. But does no one ever realise what the hell they're doing? Why is no one watching their fingers? When a plotline develops about genetic memory, I was unimpressed at first, thinking this was going to prove to be some lefty die wish-wash. But the actual journey into this memory, undertaken by the young sister Lilia, proved to be one of the more interesting aspects of Prophecy. I feel the show does the visuals of the horror she encounters exceptionally well, the dive into the memory of her ancestors being hauntingly unpleasant. My driver Bez assures me he's done some bad shrooms in his time, but they ain't nothing as bad as this. Dune is an uncaring, brutal universe where murders and assassinations are commonplace. No one is safe. Indeed, the higher the status, the bigger the target on the person, and the methods of murder are often quite horrific. Throat slicing, poisonings, and far, far worse. Prophecy stays true to this dynamic, and there is never ease for anyone within its confines. Something I'm thankful the show has achieved. So, I've begun Dune Prophecy, and will I finish it? Yes, I think I will. The show is not going to be for everyone. It doesn't have the scope or depth of, say, Game of Thrones, and nor will it be as impactful culturally. But if you're prepared for a slightly lesser show that's handled well enough, then I think there is enjoyment to be had here. It's only 6 episodes after all. It could be worse. It could be Rings of Power.